Welcome to the Grow Your Clinic podcast. My name is Ben Lynch. Today we have the wonderful Stacey Copas joining us. Stacey helps leaders shift the way they perceive and respond to change and adversity, showing them how to be resilient in business and life. Stacey is a speaker, author, and consultant. She authored the book, How to Be Resilient, the blueprint for getting results when things don't go to plan. Some simple strategies for turning adversity into an asset. I had admired Stacey's work for a long time and we had some mutual connections. And I thought the perspective she was sharing about adversity was so powerful because at the age of 12, when she had the whole of her life ahead of her, when she had a blueprint, she was absolutely certain about how her life would pan out. One of those kids that just knew from the beginning, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to be. At the age of 12, a simple accident left her disabled. And we shared the adversity story that she had been through of an identity crisis, of all the challenges that came with the rehabilitation period, the change of her life and where it now went, a different path, and the things she had to come to terms with during those ups and downs. And some lessons in hindsight, some principles in hindsight that she's been able to identify that helped her navigate the most challenging times. We talk about how she went to some dark, dark places and some of the things that have helped her move beyond that. Stacey now helps leaders understand some of those principles so that they can navigate through the challenging times in business and life and help their team members do the same if they're struggling with some adversity or challenged by some adversity. There's some real practicality here, and we go deep into the real-world experience of Stacey and how she's navigated and become a truly inspirational character when perhaps many years ago it could have taken a very different route for her. Personally, I loved listening to some of the profound wisdom that she shared, some of the deep places of thought and reflection she's gone to navigate to where she is. She's an inspiration. I absolutely loved hearing her message, and I hope you do too. Enjoy.
This is the Grow Your Clinic podcast from Clinic Mastery. We help progressive health professionals to lead inspired teams, transform client experiences, and build clinics for good. Now, it's time to grow your clinic.
Stacey, welcome to the show.
Awesome to be here, Ben.
I know we've been teeing this up for a while now, and I've been excited on a number of fronts to dive into your personal experience, which has really become a wonderful story and evolution, and also now your expertise in dealing with resilience in life and in business. But to give our listeners a bit of an idea as to who you are, I've got a couple of questions just to fire your way. The first is, what are you reading right now? What book are you reading?
Okay, I have a couple of books on the go.
Nice.
So on the audiobook, I'm listening to Cal Newport, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And I love his previous two books that I have already read is Deep Work and Digital Minimalism.
Yes.
Digital Minimalism was just amazing. So I'm into Cal Newport stuff. As far as the hard copy book, I'm actually just started reading Kyle Cease, The Illusion of Money, which has been really, really interesting. And it's, I guess the subtitle is How Chasing Money is Stopping You from Receiving It. So
wow,
I think
I've heard of that one. Thank you.
Yeah, it's only just been released. And then on my Kindle, I'm good at starting things and not great at finishing things. And on my Kindle, I am reading Humour That Works by Andrew Tarvin, which is all about how we can actually use humour in the workplace, which is a really, really good read as well. So all nonfiction. I don't read fiction.
Yes.
I go to the movies for fiction.
Yeah, I'm much the same. But how interesting. I think perhaps you're like a lot of business owners that I speak with. They've got multiple books on the go at once. I actually remember someone saying that's a good thing to do because you're hearing all these different stories or ideas and you actually start to pull them together as you're going through multiple books. So I love it. I've got about 4 on the go as well. The other question is, who inspires you?
It's really fascinating because I get asked about inspiration a lot, being perceived as an inspirational speaker.
Yes.
And it's been interesting because it's been hard to pinpoint sort of one or two people. Who I would say has probably had the biggest impact from an inspirational perspective in more recent times is Layne Beachley.
Oh, cool.
Layne has been someone that I looked up to as a younger person.
Yeah.
And then later in life, I had the opportunity to get a grant from her foundation for sport. So I got to actually meet Layne in person. I got to work with Layne. I got to be mentored by Layne. Cool. And then through just how amazing that experience was, I then started to donate money to the foundation. I then got asked to become an ambassador and a mentor for her foundation. So She's somebody that if I was to put, one person, but overall I'm inspired by people that have probably, I guess overcoming adversity is such a huge thing. I think anybody that's had been dealt a rough hand and they've been able to turn it around, then that inspires me. But I think the thing with inspiration is that people are often always looking for it externally. And I found that if the primary source of your inspiration doesn't come from within, it's not sustainable. So the external stuff's good for top-ups.
Oh, wow. I sense we're going to dive deep into that as we explore resilience, which is definitely a key theme here. The other thing, I've got 2 more before we dive into things here, is what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Wow. When I was growing up, I was one of these probably rare children in that I knew what I was going to be when I grew up, what I thought I was going to be when I grew up, when I was still in preschool.
Wow.
So all I wanted to do was be a vet. So, yeah, that was my sole focus. So going
And was that because of family or friends, or do you remember what it was?
I just loved animals and had this massive curiosity. Like I had the bug catchers and the butterfly nets and, I was the kid that was collecting lizards and spiders and doing all that sort of stuff. It was just fascinated with animals, had pet dogs and cats and turtles and all that sort of stuff, birds. Wow. So yeah, all I wanted to do was be a vet. And clearly I'm not a vet right now. So there was a detour.
Yes. Oh, no, it's always fascinating to see the path that you think you might take and then where you end up. And we'll talk about your story in just a moment. The final one here is, what's a motto that you live by? I'm sure there's a few, but is there one that stands out for you that you always recenter yourself to?
The one that I use all the time is be your best. And you've probably noticed even on our comms, I sign off all of my communications with be your best. And that message is twofold. That's a message to who I'm communicating with. And every single time I write it, it's a message to myself. So that's sort of become my, just be your best. And because the emphasis there is on your best. So removing that comparison and just constantly going, well, how can I be better than I was yesterday?
Powerful. I love the fact that you see it as a message to yourself as well. That's awesome. We'll talk about how you've shaped your environment as well to help you grow and transform over your career. But I'm interested to go back to where it all began. As a youngster, I think you were 12 years old when you faced some adversity, and that was a real catalyst for perhaps where you are today. What happened when you were younger, and how has it resulted in where you are today?
Yeah, so just, I guess, looping back to that really clear plan I had for my life as, probably from 3 years old of wanting to be a vet. Wow. And so that was my plan. And up until, at 12 years old, unfortunately, I had an accident where I was diving in a relative's backyard swimming pool, and it was something I did all the time when I visited this relative's place. And I was being yelled at to stop, but being 12 and bulletproof and invincible as we were at that age, I'm like, not listening to that. And yeah, just this one particular time I was standing on the edge of the pool and I thought I was splashing too much as I was diving in. So I stood there for a moment and I thought, how can I make a perfect dive without splashing? So I stood there for a moment and I thought, what if I hold my feet together and try and keep my legs straight? In theory, I thought that would make, a splashless dive. So I took a deep breath and I did exactly that. And it felt like any other dive until I went to swim up to the surface and I realized I couldn't move.
Oh.
So I didn't feel any pain. I didn't feel like anything had gone wrong. I just could not move. So I was conscious. And so holding my breath, panicking, obviously, trying desperately to get the attention of my brother or my younger brother who was 10. He was in the pool with me and a couple of other boys his age. And so desperately trying to think, how can I get the attention? But I couldn't move. So I held my breath as long as I could. But then when I couldn't hold it any longer, I had to give in. And as I gave in, I breathed in, and as my lungs filled with water, I blacked out.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was eventually my brother realised I wasn't mucking around. He thought I was just joking. And anyway, he pulled me out and raised the alarm for help. And it was at the third hospital late that night in intensive care that I had a doctor come and tell me that I actually had broken my neck and drowned and never walk again. So,
Wow.
I literally felt like my life was over in that moment. So clearly that dream of being a vet was gone. Prior to that, I was an athlete. I played softball. I was a pitcher in a softball team. I was one of the first girls to play soccer in my school. I represented every distance from the 100 metres through the cross country as a runner. So all of that was gone in that moment. So, that, I said, literally felt like my life was over in that moment.
I mean, how, I guess, wonderful that your brother was able there to help you in that moment, so things didn't get any worse. But then at 12 years of age, how do you process that diagnosis that people had told you, the doctors had told you you're not going to walk again at 12?
Yeah, like as I said, literally it just felt like, it felt like a death sentence to me in that moment. And so at that time, I'd been through a lot that day, having sort of been, from hospital to hospital, heavily sedated, tubes coming out of everywhere. And so in that moment, it was just, as I said, felt like a death sentence in that moment. But I think there was also a part of me that was like, oh, prove you wrong. I think I've always just been so incredibly competitive, and it's that kind of thing. You tell me I can't, then it's a red rag to a bull. So I think there was a glimmer of that at that time, but for the most part, it was just, it was probably more numb than anything.
And I imagine that you're faced with that contemplation of the identity or the blueprint you had defined for your life. All of a sudden it's thrown out the window and you go through exploring all the options. Was that something that you had good support around you when it happened to help? Or at 12, how's your emotional intelligence to be able to work through and comprehend that and come out the other side?
Look, I think I was very stubborn. I was probably very mature. I was a very mature 12-year-old as well. But I didn't want to talk about it with anybody. Like, obviously I had social workers pushed at you and stuff like that. But yeah, I pretty much just put everything's okay, getting on with life, nothing to see here. I spent 7 months in hospital. So that sort of was a tricky part of the process. And then not being able to go to the school I was meant to go to, because I'd gotten into a selective agricultural high school as well, which was, because this happened just before Christmas. So it was the end of, I just finished primary school here in New South Wales. So, I said all my plans were lining up so beautifully. So that didn't happen. And then I had to go to a school where I didn't know anybody. I had to go start in the middle of the year, which I think, sucks at the best of times. But like, I was 3 days out of hospital and, being sort of thrust into the middle of the year at this huge school where I didn't know a single soul. And so I really, really did struggle with it. But again, it was just it's stony faced. I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
I look back at photos and I'm like, I didn't smile a lot then, but I also didn't let anything else on. But like a lot of teenagers, I ended up, with some very unhealthy ways of dealing with how I was feeling about life, and spent a great deal of my high school years drunk and stoned. And that was in hindsight, I was trying to create these moments of artificial happiness. And, they were great in those moments, but in between sort of lead you down deeper, pits. But, thankfully I sort of got out of that headspace as I got towards the end of high school and, started to turn around from there.
What was it at the end of high school there that allowed you, or you felt was helpful in getting out of that headspace?
Oh, look, I had a couple of rock bottom moments that I found myself in situations that I never thought I would find myself in, and where, I was contemplating not being here at all. And I was very, very close. And at one point, it was the only thing that stopped me was the fear that I would be found before I was gone and I would end up worse than what I was. And had I had a guarantee in that moment that that would not have happened, I probably would have followed through on it. And, that scared me. Like it really scared me because, you hear about people, that have either contemplated or have taken their own life. And you sort of think, how can anything be that bad? And, I guess we always have these judgments about people that find themselves in that places. And then when I found myself in that place, and so I didn't tell anybody about that either. It wasn't until I wrote my book a few years ago that I even alluded to it. But that was that moment where I thought, what the hell am I doing? And that was probably the most rock bottom moment. And then I had another moment just prior to that where I was getting to the point where I was stoned at school, and I was so stoned that I couldn't speak. And so I had a few moments where I had a few close calls there where I had friends cover for me and stuff like that. Like I couldn't even read properly. I was that smashed some days. So there was those moments where I'm like, what the hell are you doing with yourself? And just getting foggier and foggier, and thought, look, this is crazy. So left a lot of that stuff behind. And it wasn't probably until I sort of got, towards the end of high school, so I couldn't be a vet, so all that identity stuff was still there. But, it was once I sort of got out, got a job, just a normal job like anyone else, and just got on just doing what all my peers were doing. Got a job, full-time job, got my license, got a car, ended up dating someone I worked with, just almost all the normal stuff. And I think that's when I sort of got to that point where I'm like, oh yeah, it's okay.
Started to get a bit of normality in your life. When you reflect on that period and coming out of it, now you speak a lot about resilience and facing adversity. Were there some lessons or principles that you're able to see in hindsight that have been helpful moving forward?
Yeah, look, all of it's been in hindsight because, the resilience piece didn't come until well into my 30s. And, it was actually a mentor that even put the label resilience to what I do. And so once that had happened, then I looked back and I was like, okay, what did I actually do? Because so much of it happened, I guess, without me even realizing how I did it or what I was doing or why I was doing it. And what I found probably the two biggest things were reframing a situation and gratitude.
Tell me more about the reframing.
So rather than, like, I got to the proverbial fork in the road where, you had to decide whether you get on with it or you give up. And obviously I chose to get on with it. But it just came down to taking responsibility for my lot in life. And that whole thing about recognizing that I can't change anything that's happened, but I have complete control about what comes next. So in any moment, no matter how crap it feels, then I just turn around and go, look, I'm grateful for it. Thank you. Even if it doesn't feel like something to be really thankful for, but gratitude's been the biggest part. And so I got to the point where I actually look back at what happened and, say with complete sincerity that I'm grateful that happened, because it changed my life in ways that I could never have had the experiences I've had my life taken the path that I'd chosen. And I would never have met the people that I've met. I would never have been to the places I've been had my life taken that path. So it just came back to, just being grateful for it. And once I was grateful for it, rather than resenting that or being hung up on what I was missing out on, and, again, the reframe was coming back to going, rather than beating yourself up about what I didn't have, it was like, okay, focusing on what I do have. And that's just been such a key part of what I do now. It's taking that responsibility. So stop blaming everyone else, stop blaming the world, stop waiting for someone to save you, because no one's going to save you. Like, we've got to actually take that ownership ourselves. And the reframe, it's around the language. So being very conscious not to overly dramatize stuff with, overly dramatic language, just be more positive. We're really good at catastrophizing and awfulizing and doing all that sort of stuff. But we're not that great at actually putting a positive spin on things. So it's just checking in with the language can be just so simple. Even just simple stuff like, sometimes we find ourselves getting frustrated and going, I hate that I have to do this. But, if we just reframe it and go, I get to do this.
Yeah.
Just all these little tiny word swaps.
Wonderful.
And people go, they're just words, but they make a huge difference on the experience we have. So, gratitude, reframing and taking ownership is the biggest part. So many people think the world owes us a favour, but I think that, we owe it.
Wow.
Really, I think that there's so much more that we can give. And that was, another aspect of it is, when you find yourself in a hole, it's like, well, how can you actually go and help someone else? I think if we can get out of our own head and externalize and, do something or help somebody else, and so many things that I realized. And, I ended up, did volunteer. I, volunteered in youth groups when I was a teenager. I ended up on committees and boards and things like that, even in my early 20s, and got involved in politics. So it's just so many things I did because it was all about, okay, how can I make a difference externally rather than focusing on my own shit?
Powerful. Was it someone that pointed out, because those three things take, from at least what I've seen, a fair bit of emotional intelligence or self-reflection to be able to understand those things and change how you're going about them. You mentioned a mentor a couple of times. Was it someone who picked up and said, look, you've got to understand this about your language? Or was it something you just noticed? How did you come to knowing, all right, actually the way I'm positioning these things could be a whole lot better?
Yeah, I think it was just stuff that I found that I just had a habit of doing. And then what was really fascinating is that when I actually put my framework of resilience together, I deliberately did not go and read anything else on resilience or anything like that. Because I wanted to just go, well, how did I do it? And then afterwards I kept coming across stuff. I'm like, oh, it just really supported what I did. But as far as mentors, they came quite late in the piece. Like I didn't even go down the line of personal development really until I was in my late 20s. Mm-hmm. And it's quite funny because I fell into that interestingly, and I think how a lot of people do through, a double in direct selling, which I think was really interesting. And I think that, that there was a personal development that started with that. And then I really dug deep into personal development in my early 30s. And it was through the mentors that I found through that. And one in particular that just hammered me because about speaking and sharing my story. And I'm like, I don't want to share my story because I'm a girl from the western suburbs of Sydney, and everyone will think I'm a total wanker for talking about myself. And he was the one that said, Stacey, you got to get over yourself. It's not about you, it's about your audience and with what you've experienced in your story and what you've learned. If you don't share your story, you're being selfish.
Wow, that's huge.
And that conversation led me to where I am now. So, yeah.
That's quite incredible to have that sort of guidance. And I'm interested in your perspective on, you work a lot, consult a lot with teams and leadership in business and varying other industries. When someone on the team might be facing adversity or they might be going through something and you as the leader have a sense of it, perhaps you're aware of it. Some of the leaders I speak to, they're like, I don't know how to approach this person. I'm not sure I'm even capable of helping them. What do you go through, and maybe having experienced both sides of that, having the help of a mentor and going, oh, okay, actually I've had someone really call me out quite sharply and tell me to step up my game. They weren't too precious about it. And then also coaching and working with leaders some of the things you go through to actually help leaders deal with team members who might be facing some form of adversity or challenge? What are some of the principles you use to guide them?
I think the most important thing is making sure that you've actually got a good relationship first,
Right.
because I think sometimes they find themselves in a situation where they go, I don't know how to handle this, and it's because they don't have that rapport and that trust in the
Mm,
beginning. So one of the things that I share with all leaders is to make sure that they're having very, very regular informal conversations with their teams, rather than it
nice.
just being all your official line. And a lot of the time that they don't really even have conversations with them, unless it's the mandatory appraisal times and stuff like
Yes.
that.
Yep.
Whereas, the recommendation I have for all leaders is at least once a week to take 30 seconds to just have a stand-up chat with, one-on-one with their team, and whether it's, and also probably in a huddle type thing, is to go, hey, what are you working on? How are you feeling about it? What challenges you're finding, and how can I best support you?
Mm,
And just by having those conversations all the time, then it probably won't come to a point where there's that, perhaps that real tension, or there's the feeling that something's really amiss. Because if you're having those conversations all the time and there is that genuine trust and rapport, and you get to actually have, you don't want to be their therapist,
sure,
but
sure.
there's a line, but having enough there to be able to go, to have that confidence to go, hey, I just get the feeling that something's not quite right. Are you okay?
Mm,
And
mm,
just to open that dialogue. But I think that if there isn't that relationship and that trust there in the beginning, that makes it really difficult to have
mm.
that conversation at all.
It's a wonderful framework of having those regular informal conversations with your team. I think that's a very practical thing that you could take away to instill in your rhythm during the week.
Yeah.
What about, you'd spoken about the framework that you use for resilience. Can you touch on what's part of that framework? If someone is listening in at the moment and they're going through some challenges or adversities in their business, they might have had team members leave and all of a sudden there's a whole lot of work thrown back onto them. They might be facing financial pressures of barely breaking even and wondering whether they can keep their doors open. They might be facing their own health challenges and wondering about their capacity to work, or many, many other things. What are some of the things that you recommend as part of that framework for resilience that can help people navigate this period in their life?
Yeah, I find that coming back to gratitude, and I know it just sounds so counterintuitive, but when we do find ourselves in those places where we are feeling a bit overwhelmed and feel like everything is getting on top of us, it is actually just to stop and use gratitude. And the way that I do that is, you typically get told, every day write down 3 things you're grateful for. And I can't
Yes.
say that's worked really well for me, because you find you write the same stuff every day, or you find you roll in your eyes, or you find you think, oh, just this again.
Yes.
So the angles I come at it from is there's 2 things. So there's the, what was the best thing that happened today,
Mm,
and just starting with that reflection. The other one is just using, I guess it's a version of an affirmation, a mantra. I've got like a 4-line version of it, but the first line, and I use this all the time. Like, I use it when I close my eyes of the night, when I open my eyes in the morning, I use it. And if I find myself stuck in that everything's on top of me, then I stop, take a deep breath and go, thank you for the opportunity to be who I am, where I am, with what I have at this moment in time. And it just
wow.
grounds you in that moment. And it just goes, well, look, again, you're in a situation where sometimes we're actually, it's a privilege to have these challenges. You know,
Wow.
it's
That's a
it,
great
it, it
positioning.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, to have a lot of these challenges, while they feel overwhelming in the moment, when you look at it, it means that, you know what, you've stood up for something, you've started something, you've created something, you've created an environment for other people to thrive, particularly You know, for people that have got a practice where they're helping other people, like they've created a space to help other people be their best. And how awesome is that?
Yeah.
So, you know, like I think sometimes we get so stuck in trying to find the tactical or the how.
Yeah.
And I find if we get more focused on the what and the why and the just how awesome is it to just be, then the how takes care of itself. So often, the how is often the easiest part, but the how's the thing we get so stressed about.
And I understand, especially with the wonderful community we have here of scientists, health professionals, really, they're analytical.
Very tactical.
Very tactical, very much about the how. I love you touching on that, going, you know, if you get really certain on what it is that you want and why, the how you will be able to find. It's starting with that and the gratitude in particular. So you have a mantra that you do every day in the morning and the evening. It's 4 lines, like a script that you go through and you just work each time.
Yeah.
And then you also have a gratitude sentence that you use in that moment. And then were there some other gratitude things that you do? Do you do journaling or? Yep.
Yeah, journaling's been a massive part. I was a bit late to the party on it, but
That's all right.
In this stint of journaling, I have not missed a night in just over 4 years.
Oh, wow. Clap it up.
I have not broken. Don't break the chain. And every night, some nights it might be one sentence. Some nights it's been 2,500 words.
Wow.
Because stuff has just flowed from me and through me. It's one of those things. Sometimes people say that whole thing about sometimes things coming through us rather than from us. And sometimes through the process of journaling, then that can really happen where you just feel like I type my evening journal. And it started with, again, what was the best thing that happened today? Often it can be just a quick recap of the day. A recap of the day can lead to some questions. A recap of the day can lead to pulling apart how I did something in a particular scenario. What would I do differently? What did I take from it? And then also a future pacing exercise as well. So as part of that, I pick a date. And this has only been in the last sort of 3 to 6 months I've been doing this. So I have my wrap up of the day, and then I pick a date in the future and I write a sentence as if I'm writing the journal on that date.
Oh, cool. So it's like, I am.
Yeah, or I have. And one of the things that was really cool I did, because I've just come back from my first trip to the US and Canada, and it was an 18-day, 7-flight, grueling schedule. I've never flown that far before. But what I started doing about 6 weeks before I left was I was picking the date that I'd gotten back, and I was writing about, you know, wow, look, I'm tired and everything went really well. And the best part of it is that in all of those flights, I only had a 40-minute delay. And
wow,
I came back and the longest delay I had in 7 flights was 40 minutes, Toronto to Vegas. And it was just one of those things that, you know, we're writing the future before it happens. And then once you anyway, so the crazy manifesting. But again, it's just starting, particularly if you've got something big that's coming up in the future that you might be consuming a lot of headspace on. It can be just writing a couple of sentences about your ideal version of how that played out as if you were reflecting back on the gap. And I find that's been super powerful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that perhaps you've opened up the rule book, so to speak, on what journaling should look like in a way of some sort of structure we should follow, but going, you know what, maybe it's a sentence, maybe it's longer. I'm just going to get there. I'm going to show up and see what happens in that session.
Yeah, and committing to it is that I think in the first, I aimed for 90 days in the first stint, and I even got out of bed a couple of times in that 90 days because, you know, I was like, no, it's no exceptions. And, you know, for me, getting back out of bed isn't easy, but I did. I literally got back out of bed at midnight and would write, even if it was one sentence. Sometimes I do it on my phone, you know, just before I go to bed or whatever, but I have not broken the chain in 4 years. And it just really helps me with clarity and processing. And manifesting stuff in the future.
That's wonderful. I know I've struggled to have that discipline to do it and never found a method that's been right until I realized actually doing video and audio works really well for me. So I just phone, audio or video, usually video because it gets to display things. So I love the fact that, what you're saying is trial a few different things and also don't have any expectations necessarily of how it should be done in any particular way, but that you're showing up and just committing to the discipline to do it. That is wonderful. I imagine as well, when people, and I speak maybe just from my own perspective here, of whenever there are challenges, you end up being so much in your own head, having these discussions, that to actually get it out onto a piece of paper or verbalize it in a recording actually helps you work through some of that how or that clarity you need to move through that period. Is that what you've found with journaling, or has it just been a good, take the baggage off in a way?
No, 100%. Like I've said many times that I think journaling has probably saved me tens of thousands of dollars in therapy because it's getting it out of your head. And again, some people might want to talk to somebody. Like I don't. Like that's, I don't. I like to process things and then figure it out. But sometimes it's just doing that massive dump. And, some of those nights where it's been 1,000, 2,000 words has been exactly that. I've been in a really, really challenging, stressful situation. And what I've done is just free flowed. It's like with no structure, just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. It may not have made a lot of sense, but I just did that until it was out. It's kind of like venting to yourself. And then sometimes through that process, you do find answers. But again, it's having as you touched on before, it's no expectation. It's just doing it and seeing where it goes.
Wonderful. Another brilliant practical thing to take away from how to be the best version of yourself. I love that. And the evolution of your story over time, getting jobs, normal jobs, as you said, and then progressing into the author, speaker, trainer, consultant that you are. One thing that I've admired from afar is the brand that you bring. I know that you've got a very clear message that you offer the community and some very practical frameworks for how they can deal with adversity, challenges, resilience, and plenty more, leadership, team, culture. I'm interested in tapping into some of those elements of the brand that you've established as well, because we're dealing with clinic owners, health professionals who help their community in various aspects of their health and have a wonderful opportunity to develop the brand that they have. Just one thing off the top is you've got a very red presence,
yes,
which I love. I imagine that's pretty deliberate. Can you share with us how did that come about? What does that mean and signify for you?
It's actually probably more accidental than it appears.
Oh, right.
Just don't tell anyone. It's really interesting that I never wore red until my first job. I had a front desk role in a very busy engineering firm, and I had to wear a red blazer. And everyone commented about how great red looked. So I started wearing more red. And this was I was showing my age now, 1997. And then when I started speaking, which, as I said, was like the first time I ever jumped on stage and shared any version of my story was 2011. So this is a big jump. I wore red because I just thought that red just stood out, and it was quite bold. Most people are wearing your typical blue navy blue charcoal, that sort of stuff, black. Yeah, and particularly on stages and in media and everything like that. And I thought, look, if I look good in red and it stands out, and I find now, particularly on a stage, like it's very rare you're going to get a red backdrop either. So you're not going to blend in or clash with the backdrop, but it's just a solid colour. And so that then evolved into my brand colour. And then what's really fabulous is that because I build a lot of my business using LinkedIn, and I know that's something that you talk about with your members as well, is that I will go and meet somebody, in a cafe or something. They go, "Oh, I'm so glad you wore your red top. You were easy to find in the cafe." So, but it also now becomes that it's such an easy thing for me. I go shopping. I stand at the door of a shop and I just do the scan. Red, no, keep moving. And even I've got a sort of a red turtleneck and it's my winter uniform. Like, okay, it's for women, it's interesting because I don't see women have a uniform as much as men do, because there's obviously a lot more judgment and stuff like that about what women wear. But for me, I found I've got 5 of the same top. It might be 4 or 5 different versions of it. But anytime you'll see me on stage or an event or anything like that, it'll be a red top and a red top, black pants, or if it's a black tie do, it'll be a red dress. And it just makes it easier. And as you said, it's good that now people associate it. And sometimes I'll do an Insta story and I'll get a comment, "Oh my God, you're not wearing red."
I reckon I saw one of yours and I was like, "Is that Stacey?" Not in the red. So associated with you and your brand.
Yeah. And like I said, look, red is bold, it's passionate. Some people might find that it could be, too dominant, but I just sort of find it's actually standing out. And for me, it's not being afraid to do it. The red lipstick has come later. That was the scariest part. But it just comes out. I think it really represents that being your best, and whatever it is with anyone that's looking at their brand, it's coming out and it's going, well, okay, what represents them? Because there's no point having some branding agency coming around and saying, because you're in the health space, that you should be using these particular colours and all this sort of stuff. It's like, okay, there might be some psychology behind that.
Blue or green, typically.
Yeah, but even with speakers, it's like, blue is trust and all these, green is health and growth and all these sort of things, right? Yeah. But it's like, if it doesn't represent them, because obviously your brand needs to represent you in every single touch point that someone has. And I guess that's the question that people need to ask is every interaction that someone has with me, are they getting the same experience? And what can they do to then make sure that they nail that? And even I have people actually leave me messages and say, "Oh my God, your voicemail," even down to your voicemail.
Yes.
People will stop and go, "I love your voicemail because it represents you." Yeah. And it's different. So it's all those little touch points.
I love that. Little shout out to Shane Davis there about the importance of voicemails. I love it. I love it. The consistency, what you alluded to there, the consistency of the brand. And obviously we're talking here about a couple of more facade things of colors and how you might wear that and present. Brand, I love that you pointed out being that consistency of experience, actually what you're delivering, who you are as the product at the moment. And that's very true for clinics who they are and their practitioners and admin are, as a consistent display of the experience from what they wear, what they say, how they act, how they care for people. That is wonderful. I'm interested in when you started to evolve into the speaking, coaching, authoring space. There are plenty of people who speak about resilience. There are plenty of people who talk about, leadership and leading through challenging times. When you came to thinking about your brand, I'm sure it's a constant evolution. What were some of the things that you went about constructing to make yourself unique and for you to do you? Like you said, you didn't look at any other books when you wrote your own. What were some of the things that you did, though, to think about how you might position yourself as a brand and get inquiries for speaking engagements and get clients to come to you? What were some of the things you did?
I think one of the biggest lessons I took that really helped me with that is, I think a lot of us, and particularly, in the space that you and your members are in as well, is that there's lots of the same thing out there. And what I realized is that it's okay because, there's not one hairdresser, there's not one tire shop, there's not one real estate. But it comes down to you're an individual voice. So it comes down to we can all share a similar message, but it's like recognizing that clients, patients, whoever we're working with are going to resonate with us. Wow. And so, and not being, and I think the other thing is too, is when we start out, we have this scarcity mentality that we're worried that, that we're either going to turn people off or we're going to miss out on an opportunity if we don't stay, like if we do stay in our lane. And like I got hammered into me, the inch wide, mile deep, all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, oh, no, I'll miss out on an opportunity. But then once you realize that your unique value is just in who you are. And so I share, even in every keynote, I share in the beginning of my keynotes is that, the caveat on what I'm sharing is that it sounds simple because it is. And the problem with simplicity is you're going to go, yeah, I know that, and you're going to switch off. But it's recognizing that often we need to hear the same thing over and over again, either at different times in our lives or from different messengers. And this is the thing, is it's the messenger that's the important thing. It's not always the message. It's the messenger and it's the timing of the message. So that's the biggie. So it's where people are showing up and people are connecting with their personality, their style, and just being really authentic in it. So not trying to be somebody else. That's the biggest mistake anyone can make, is going, oh, you know what, I saw this guy do something really good, so I should just try and be a clone of that person. It's the biggest mistake anyone can make. So probably the best feedback I get all the time when I get off stage is people go, oh my God, you're just like you were on stage, and you're just like I saw on your Instagram, or you're just like I read on your blog. And I'm like, that's what we want to be doing, is always showing up, knowing who we are, what we stand for, what value we bring, focusing on how we're helping other people. And if we can stand in that space all the time, then it just becomes effortless to be able to connect on that level with our clients and our patients.
I love that. I think, Stacey, you started the session today talking about inspiration coming from within. And I think even to brand and client experience and how you show up in the marketplace, you're saying, really, it's got to be authentic. It's got to come from within. And even the transformation out of adversity was got to come from within first of all, and then go and help other people as well. So there's almost a theme there about the importance of journaling, documenting, getting that connection back to yourself. That's certainly what I've connected with. And I love the message that you have. So profound and also really practical as well. If you were to leave our listeners today with just a golden nugget or a parting piece of advice that they could take from today, what would that be?
Oh, look, I think gratitude is the one. It's the thing that changes everything for me, even in the most challenging of times. It's always just stopping and being grateful for, like I said, who you are, where you are, and what you have at that moment in time, not getting hung up in what's happened in the past, what's happening in the future, anything. It's just coming back to being grounded in the moment. And there's no more powerful way to do that than gratitude. So if they can take that personally as a leader, they can then ingrain that in their teams, and they can then ingrain that into their client base, their patient base. It's like, how can they actually become gratitude centric in everything they do? And it could be even when they're having that stand up chat, 30 seconds, turning around to that person and going, so what was the best thing that's happened in your world this week? What are you most excited about? Or, what are you most grateful for? Like that kind of stuff. Just to start to do that. And again, it's simple. Like, it's super, super simple. It's not some huge marketing tactic or anything like that. It's just, it's just coming back to that really, really simple. And also the personal responsibility, that I think what's that old saying, if it is to be, it is up to me. All those two little words, simple and powerful, but it is, it's just, don't not sort of blaming anybody else. It's just taking ownership and going, yep, can't change the past, but I can change what happens from this point forward. And just be focusing on gratitude for the present and being excited about what's coming up. And just knowing that in any moment that whether an experience is positive or negative is completely their choice.
Powerful, powerful stuff. I love that. And I love the simplicity, like you said. One of the reasons in our name we have mastery is that's the repetition of the simple things. It's about really mastering it, like you've said all along. And I love the gratitude note. Even if you are faced with adversity, I think that can be one of the most challenging things to go, I'm not grateful for anything. This is bloody hard work, or I'm up against it. What you're saying is come back to that place, start from that place, and find a new level of the best version of you, which I love. Stacey, it's been profound. For those listeners that really want to connect with you further, follow up on your work, what's the best way that they could do that?
Yeah, probably two ways. Like LinkedIn is the place I'm the most active. So just Stacey Copas on LinkedIn, or also just going back to my website. There's all my contact details and links to blogs and interviews and the book and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, and I look after all my stuff myself. So even though my LinkedIn has gotten into a pretty huge beast, every single interaction, every connection request I handle personally. I respond with a personal note, and I love that connection. So yeah, definitely if anyone wants to reach out, they'll get me. I really welcome those interactions.
Awesome. I love that connection as well, going deep and connecting with the real you. I'm sure there's plenty that people will gain from being part of your community and learning from the lessons as you scribe them down moving forward. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Grow Your Clinic podcast. Head on over to clinicmastery.com for all the show notes and relevant links. They'll all be there. We'll see you on another episode very soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Grow Your Clinic podcast. To find out more about past episodes or how we can help you, head to www.clinicmastery.com/podcast. And please remember to rate and review us on your podcast player of choice. See you on the next episode.